And welcome to an interview of candidates for the Florida House of Representatives, District 24, by the Editorial Board of the St. Augustine Record. We're joined by current District 24 Representative Paul Renner, a Republican, and challenger Adam Morley, a Democrat. My name is Mark Cox. I'm the General Manager of St. Augustine Record, and with me today are Opinion Page Editor Jim Sutton and Executive Editor Craig Richardson. So to start things off here today, we'd like each of you to take a few moments, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background, why you're running for office, and we'll start with the challenger, Adam Morley. Adam, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Adam Morley. I am from the district. I am a captain by trade. So with that said, some of my big issues are definitely going to revolve around water and state water policy. We have a lot of issues that my background would lend itself well to in the state capitol. My wife and I own a business here. We are raising our family here, and it's home. And that's one of the main reasons that I really want to run, is that I feel having my background in the district is going to make a better, more accurate representation for a state representative in Tallahassee. Let's see, a few notes here. I do sit on the board of North Florida Coastal Caretakers. I also sit on the board of the Friends of A1A Scenic and Historic Byways, and I'm also on the board of the Friends of Tomoka Basin State Parks. So all within my district, a lot of connections, a lot of roots here that really allow me to have a finger on the pulse, as they would say, of the community and the issues that are going on. Owning a small business here in the district has really helped me get to know and understand a lot of the issues that everyday people care about, and that's what I'm running to represent. I want to make sure that we have someone who's advocating for our water, someone who is advocating for the restoration and protection of home rule, something that's being stripped away in Tallahassee, and someone who is going to make sure that elderly and disabled services are funded and that those residents here in our community are not forgotten about and taken care of.
Representative Renner.
Thank you very much, and it's a privilege to represent St. Johns County, Flagler, and Volusia counties in Tallahassee. My background before I got into office was as a veteran. Spent over 23 years in the military active and reserve, served in Operation Desert Storm, and then 20 years later in Afghanistan. And for me, the model for public service is really our veterans: love of country, service above self, and not quitting until the mission's complete. Also served after active duty as a prosecutor, and I understand that for government, the #1 priority is public safety. We've got to keep our streets clean. We've got to safe. We've got to keep our schools safe, and public safety is a #1 priority. I'm also a business owner, and in that regard, understand some of the challenges that our small businesses have here in Florida. And one of the benefits that we have, which is a low tax environment, an environment in which jobs and economic growth can take place. Now, the reason I'm running is to, again, continue the things we started, and that is to promote policies that encourage job growth, encourage wage increases. We have a balanced budget amendment, and so we've been able to do things and hit priorities and get the big things right while still balancing our budget and not raising taxes. That's important for the future growth of the state. For us to go, and you've heard at the state level among the statewide candidates, a proposal basically to spend more, far more than we can possibly spend with a balanced budget without dramatically raising taxes, far beyond simply a corporate income tax. And so I'm opposed to that. We have to live within our means, and we have to make priorities. One of those has been in the area of education, where we have spent more money. And so the second thing that is important to me is expanding opportunity. And the best way to do that is through world-class education, both at the K-12 level as well as at the university level. And then finally is quality of life. And Adam referred to it, and I agree with him on water, is that we do need to do everything we can. We have more people moving into the state. We've got to make sure our water supply is there for us, that it's clean water. And so in that regard, I've done a number of things in water projects, whether it's helping to bring funding to repair or replace wastewater treatment facilities, to put in the necessary pumping to avoid flooding problems where you have septic tanks and flooding would cause the overspill of human waste into our water bodies with the intercoastal and the ocean, and also the restoration of the Summer Haven River, which I believe will be good for the environment and also good for the economy. So in that regard, quality of life is a priority. And I also put into that category really putting people in charge of their own destiny. When we talk about home rule, the most important home rule is what takes place below the roofs of everyone in this room's home. That's individuals and families deciding for themselves what's the best education for our children, what's the best health care for us. When you say if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor, you ought to be able to keep your doctor, and that hasn't happened. And so we're looking at ways to really make home rule meaningful, and that individuals and families make the vast majority of decisions, not government. We maximize options for people in all of those spheres. And so those three areas: promoting jobs and the economy, expanding opportunity, as well as preserving our great quality of life in this area.
I have a question there. I want to preface it so some of the newer readers may not know. This is not their first time around. These two guys ran against you in 2015 for the 2016.
3 times.
Three.
We ran in the special election.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We're on speed dial with
Yeah.
each other.
It's not a first read.
Yeah.
I think the last one was about 60. You got about 67%.
It was about 60-40.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, but it may have been the one I didn't know about. But this issue in the last couple of years, the number of independents in the county have really grown. In fact, it's almost, depending on what time of year it is, it can exceed the Democrats or be slightly under. Do either of you see that as benefiting you in this election as opposed to the last couple times around? I mean,
I do, but I would like to first say that there was a clear misrepresentation on what home rule is and what it's stated in the Constitution. Home rule is not under our households, and that's not the issue that we're talking about. Home rule is the ability for communities to decide the direction that we go as a community. And Tallahassee has been actively passing legislation that removes this home rule, which is in our state's constitution, removing our ability as a community to decide the direction that we go. So I believe we have enough well-informed, well-educated individuals here locally to help guide us in the right direction, and that we don't need outside politicians from Jacksonville coming in and telling us what's best for us. I think that we need more local control. And when we talk about local control and home rule, we're not talking about underneath our residential roofs. With the question of independents and NPAs, I think that it's great that the number is growing. I do think that it is going to benefit me in my race, because there's a reason that they are NPAs and nonpartisan or independents. They don't wish to identify with either of the parties, and I fully respect that. And that's why I'm not really running on a partisan platform. I'm running on a platform that is focused on the needs of this district, and that's what I'm going to do. That's why I have across the political spectrum support from left to right and everywhere in between. And I'm glad that I have that. And I do think that the independents and NPAs are going to swing this in my favor.
So I'll take both the home rule question and your question and get to it. But with respect to home rule, it's real simple. The local, state, and federal governments each have a role, and neither should interfere in the other. On a key signature issue in this district, which at least in Flagler County for many residents was the issue of short-term vacation rentals. I voted in favor of what would be termed home rule to maintain the county ordinances as they were, because I thought they were a reasonable balance between the rights of property owners and the rights of the community as a whole to regulate short-term vacation rentals. And so on that key issue that I think affects our district, I was actually voted in favor of home rule. However, there are bills in the legislature that deal with preemption where home rule has run awry. I'll give you an example. Uber. Most of us are familiar with some of the ride shares in the city of Orlando. They had banned Uber because of the power of the taxi cabs. And so oftentimes you see special interest that at the local level are more powerful than and have an outside influence, and as a consequence, literally banned Uber drivers and Lyft drivers from operating in the city of Orlando, where we all go to vacation. And so I did support preemption that would say we need one uniform statewide standard. And so in the area of commerce, this is where you see a lot of these things happening. It's not in interfering with our values. And again, where it comes to more localized issues like short-term vacation rentals, that's where I voted. I voted with home rule. And so it really is a balance. It's not a sacrosanct thing that the state should be doing or the locals. It's a question of what's the logical division between local, state, and federal.
Okay.
And independents are important. And I think, look, I think we both of us have to go out there and compete. Not everybody's all, on one side or all on the other. There's a lot of people that, for many reasons, are unhappy with the parties, or they don't see that the parties fully represent them. I think my record is one, and I'll give you an example that would appeal to independents, is fighting against corporate welfare. So everybody in this room, Adam and I included, pay taxes. We don't have a choice to do that. And so we hope that we will get back something that's broad-based. Public safety, good schools, good infrastructure, a good environment, all of these things, that we get the big things right. And yet what we've been doing in the state of Florida is taking our tax dollars, taking your money, and subsidizing private companies, many of them, most of them, actually above 1,000 employees, to lure them into the state, when the best way to do this is just simply to keep our taxes low and have all those things I just talked about: safe schools, safe streets, a strong education system, great quality of life. That is a permanent incentive. And if we keep Florida in the direction it's going, we know that thousands of people and businesses are leaving high tax states like California and Illinois and coming into the state of Florida. We don't need to take taxpayers' money and subsidize well-to-do private companies. And I think this is an issue, and I said this on the House floor because I ran that bill, that we ought to put an end to. And I believe it unites people, whether they're Bernie Sanders supporters or Ted Cruz supporters, or most of us that are somewhere in between, is that we shouldn't be taking taxpayer dollars and handing it off to private companies. And so, and that and many other areas we can talk about, lowering barriers to opportunity is another area where I've fought to make sure that the indigent have a chance to get out of poverty and rise up the economic ladder. And then many of the things we've talked about with respect to quality of life that I think would certainly appeal to voters that run right down the middle of the political road.
All right, public safety. We're going to jump into how it relates to schools and the decisions made by the legislature in the wake of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School tragedy. What else should or could be done in the next session to build on those protections?
Yeah, this was, this happened on Valentine's Day. Our session ended, I think, 3 weeks later. And so the one thing I will say to people watching, we're all frustrated. I'm sure Adam and I are both frustrated at DC and there's the lack of getting things done at that level. We get things done in the state legislature, and we put together a comprehensive package. And that package included many things. And it really treated threats like we did after 9/11 to say, if somebody's walking on school grounds with a weapon, we failed. We failed on multiple levels. And so we have to, first of all, identify the problem. And this really goes to the issue of mental health. We spend significant dollars, recurring dollars, for the future to make sure we're screening and treating people and finding people that have severe mental illness. And to do that is challenging, to know who has a treatable mental illness that will be fine and who may be the next shooter. We also, if that doesn't work and we don't catch that person, we've got money into school hardening to make sure that people don't have the same access points that we didn't build schools back 50 years ago to assume that there might be a shooting. And so we've devoted money to that. Every single school has to have a safety plan and look at ingress and egress about whether that is the best way to allow students in and out so we keep bad people out. And then we also have something that I think is important in this discussion, which is a risk protection order. So what it says is that if the police believe that you are a threat to others and you have mental instability and perhaps a proclivity for violence, they can go in and petition a court to remove not just the weapon in your possession, but all of your weapons. And so that's really where, on a bipartisan basis going forward, we need to focus. We need to focus on people, the very, very small fraction of people who cannot responsibly own firearms and cannot operate firearms. I believe strongly in the Second Amendment. I don't think that making broad restrictions on law-abiding people who have a right to defend themselves in their homes, the Second Amendment to the Constitution, the Supreme Court have said so, I believe so, is going to fix the problem. I think that that is where we need to focus on that sliver of people that are the next shooter, those people that have those mental health challenges along with a proclivity for violence. Because as the experts have told me, in the aftermath, I was on the phone with some of our mental health professionals, and I remember one lady telling me, look, I've got 10 people who talk about hurting themselves or hurting others. Most of them will never hurt a fly. Never hurt themselves, never hurt others, except for the one that does. I don't know who that is. And so this is a real challenge. It's one that we do need to do in the future. We need to spend more focus on that issue. And finally, we also, if somebody gets on school grounds, we've beefed up the money for SROs and that type of thing. But really at that point, that's a Hail Mary. We've got to get to the point where nobody is coming on the school grounds to begin with a firearm. And
at least that'd be like,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, you're going to have to repeat that question, because after that major deviation and jibber jabber over there,
okay,
I got lost.
what else should be or could be done in the next session to build upon that legislation? Since you weren't there, do you think that was enough? What was passed?
It was not enough, and I do think that it's going to take more than just the next legislative session, because we've had the supermajority control from the same party for so long that if they were interested in actually making anything happen, they could have done it. But it's clear that they have chosen not to. I'm glad that special interests were brought up in a last question, and I think special interests have a lot to do with that, from lobby groups that are in support or opposing different things. I think we need to get a lot of that money out so that our representatives, the representatives that are representing districts, are able to listen to the people and vote on behalf of the people of their district on what needs to be done. So I think one of the biggest things that can be done is elect people who are not beholden to the special interests that have a stake in the outcome of these bills and legislation that's being proposed.
And what else would you like to see happen in terms of that legislation? What else do you envision?
I don't. I have a very clear and set focus on what my priorities are going to be.
So Florida shouldn't have stricter background checks.
We should do a better job with background checks. I got my concealed weapons permit, and it was given to me like candy. It was honestly ridiculous how easily I got it. I am a Second Amendment supporter as well. I grew up here in the district, hunting, fishing. Like that's one area that I do actually get a lot of flack from the left on, because I'm not what you would typically see. I grew up in a rural district that used guns for hunting, and we're used to that. So that's something that is going to take much more input from the general public and less from the lobbyists. And I think that if we can come to a civil discussion, bringing in mental health issues as something to look at, it's going to take a bipartisan support. And right now there is no bipartisanship in Tallahassee. We need to get some more bipartisanship in Tallahassee.
So you're in the wildlife world or fried?
Do what?
So you're in the wildlife world or fried?
Yes, exactly. I love wildlife, deep fried or baked.
Okay. We asked for questions from readers, and all the ones for this one had to do with, all three that came in had to do with finance or campaign finance. But they're too long, it could take 20 minutes to answer these questions. It's basically, the questions are that Adam has, well, let's see, I think it's right now, it's about $256,000 to $21,000 in contributions. Yours are, and I'm not going to get into these, they say that 24% aren't from inside the district or whatever, but they say that he has no PAC money. How do you answer the question that you're not going to owe people when this is over? I'm just sort of paraphrasing.
Yeah, no, it's
okay.
listen, it's always a fair question, and I'll tell you. I mentioned earlier about corporate welfare. So donors that from the Northeast Florida area, in Jacksonville in particular, it is the epicenter for corporate welfare, where the city for years and years and continuing today put a lot of money, a lot of local money into these economic incentives, which I think is inappropriate. And they were, lit on fire because they've contributed to me, and that was a bill that I shepherded through, and we no longer have a single tax dollar going to support a single private sector company anymore. It has to be in one of two areas. It has to benefit infrastructure, or it has to benefit workforce development. So on issue after issue, I can point to areas where we have to go out and raise a lot of money because we don't get our message out unless we pay to do it, quite frankly. And so, but I can state that as a key example of instances in which people that have contributed may not have gotten what they hoped for. But they ought to be contributing based upon people that they see exhibiting signs of leadership. And I think that's why I've gotten as much support as I have, because we've delivered results. And as you may know, it's actually illegal to ask for something in exchange for a campaign contribution. People have not done that. People, I think at this point, after 3 years, understand that I'm going to vote for this community, period. And there's many, many issues in which we've done that.
Thank you.
93 PACs have contributed to my opponent. Less than 5%, in fact, 4.3% of the financial contributions have come from inside the district. And I've got all of that right here in the financial records. I challenge you guys to actually print that as well. I'm going to leave that for the record. Yes, get the pun.
Got it.
Okay. For the followers on social media, they know that we have ways of getting a message out. We don't need this obscene amount of money. And if you do need this obscene amount of money, it means that you're not doing a good job being cost effective and efficient with the money that you have. When you spend $15,000 just to get your name on the ballot, when it only costs $1,700 to put your name on the ballot, you're not using money wisely. So if you can't use money wisely in a campaign, it doesn't make me feel confident that you're going to use money wisely as a legislator. So if you can't be cost effective with the money when you're running for office, what's going to tell me that you can use it properly when in office?
Can I respond to that?
Of course you can.
Yeah. So I qualified by petition, so I'm not really sure what he's talking about. We got the requisite petitions to qualify. We didn't pay our filing fee. And the other thing is, look, I've had many people that have asked me, do you need help? And it's easier to raise money outside the district than inside. I'd rather raise it from other people than from my friends. And I think the record's clear enough. We're limited to $1,000 contributions at state level for state house. You mentioned $255,000. If somebody's being bought for $1,000, you need to elect a new representative. And so people have to judge me on my record. My history in the military as a prosecutor, I think, is one of a lifetime of integrity. And so not being able to get the confidence of people to support you does not make you a person of greater integrity, and neither does being able to raise money. And we're also raising money for our caucus. So we've raised a lot of money from a lot of different sources. And I think they understand, based upon the way House leadership has conducted itself, is that we're based on principle. And you can give all the money you want, but we're going to follow our principles, which are greater freedom and greater opportunity, period.
Do you have a PAC?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you had that. I seen her call. It was almost like within months after taking office, wasn't it?
Everybody's got a PAC now.
I don't have a PAC.
He will. If he gets elected, he will.
I will not have a PAC.
Well, that's fine.
That's
But yeah,
a promise.
we do, and we raise money that way, and it's to help our colleagues. So we've raised a substantial amount of money, and we'll continue to do so to help elect Republicans,
So
people that are like-minded.
about establishment, I won't have a PAC because I'm not about establishment. I'm not going to be raising money for other establishment politicians. I am a standalone candidate who is running to represent my district, so there's no need for me to have a PAC. What's going to get me reelected is the service that I provide to the district that I'm running to represent. If I can't bring something home, if I can't show them through my actions that I am working on their behalf to get reelected, it's not about money. It's about what we're doing for the people and how they feel that it's impacted them in a beneficial way.
And I agree with that statement, and I'm proud of my record. People should judge me on my record.
I mean, you mentioned House leadership a little while ago, and you're headed that way. And I guess have been you kind of been on that track 3 years ago. I mean,
Well,
It's 2020, correct?
yeah, it's a ways away. So I have to get reelected, and the Republicans have to be in the majority. But if it happens, it'll be the first time in a generation that Northeast Florida has had leadership, and that makes a big difference. And I know Adam's smiling over here, but you can laugh at it, but it's a very, very important thing for our area and something that everybody should want to have.
I don't think that our district should be used as a stepping stone to advance political careers. When you lose a race in Jacksonville by 2 votes and then move down for a special election just so that you get to Tallahassee, you don't have our district at heart and in mind. You have political careers and advancing your own political agenda in mind.
Let me respond to that. You mentioned the outcome of the election. So the voters have made a decision now. 3 times we've run against each other, and 3 times they've decided that they prefer my leadership and my record to Mr. Morley's. So they have that chance again every 2 years. And so, being sarcastic about it, you have to judge us on our record, and I have one.
As do I. And I would challenge anybody to look at what I'm about and then not just listen to the rhetoric, but also see our actions and what we are doing for this community that we are trying to represent. Yes, I've run. It does take a little bit of money, but I have decided to do this the long way. I decided to build a foundation slowly and surely and make sure that I'm hitting every pocket of constituents so that they can get to know me. I didn't just come into the area with a ton of money and throw up signs all over the place and send mailers flooding people's mailboxes so that they knew my name and voted for me. People are not voting on records, they're voting on name recognition. That's an unfortunate reality. And when you do have enough money and you can push that out there as fast as one does, it gets them elected. But in the long term, I'm confident that once people get to know who I am and what I'm about, that they will elect me.
Okay, let's talk about education again, and specifically teacher pay. St. Johns County boasts the state's top school district, yet officials say recruiting teachers to the district is challenging, never mind retaining them, specifically because of the low rate of pay offered by the state. The average pay for a teacher in St. Johns County was $46,000 for the 2016-2017 school year. That compares with about $1,000 more, the average in the state of Florida. Nationally, the average pay is $59,000. Would you support or even lead efforts to boost teacher pay? Let's start with you, Paul.
Yeah, well, I have. And so the legislature has done 2 things. One is we have historic education funding in the K-12 system. Every year I've been there, we've increased it. And as of this year, it is at the highest level it's ever been on a per student basis. Secondly, in a bill a couple years ago, we put in place teacher bonuses. So our highest performing in the next tier down of performing teachers get a bonus, and that's in place for a 3-year period to reward our highest performing teachers.
But that maxes out at about $1,000.
It's $1,200 and $800 for a 3-year period over every 3 years. The other thing you have to consider when you look at national statistics is the states that have the highest teacher salaries also have state income taxes. And so in order to keep them competitive, they have to pay them more because they have to take a greater portion of their income and not just pay federal taxes, but state taxes. And so it's not an apples to apples comparison when you compare our state against other states.
We're 45th in the country.
Well, that's based on those measurements and where you slice it. And so it's not a 45 apples to apples comparison. As I said, the teachers with the highest salaries are also in states with state income taxes. We can go there. And if Mr. Morley wants to endorse a state income tax to raise teacher pay, his candidate for governor, Andrew Gillum, has endorsed a 40% increase on our businesses to fund $1 billion in extra education spending. I can guarantee you we'll get there, but we'll get there without raising taxes and while balancing the budget. And as I mentioned, we've done a lot of things, but in setting priorities, one area where we have increased is in the area of education funding. And here in St. Johns County, where we're sitting, there was just a recent pay raise to our teachers, and it's a good thing.
Is anybody going to correct him on the state income tax and how it's in the Constitution that it can't be done? Anybody want to do that?
Go ahead.
Okay, it's in the state of the Constitution. You can't do a state income tax. It's not going to happen. So that being said, yes, I would still support a pay increase for our teachers. Like, you can ask the teachers. I know a lot of the teachers here in this community. Ask them if they think they need a pay raise. Yes, they need a pay raise. We need to make sure that our instructors or teachers that are raising our next generation and molding the minds of our next generation are getting well compensated, and they're happy to do what they do. Teachers don't teach for the money, but we still need to make it worth their while to show up and do their job as best as they can. If they're struggling at home, we say this about our children. If our children are struggling at home for any reason, they're not going to perform as well in school. If our teachers are struggling at home for any reason, they're not going to do as well teaching. And if they're not doing well at home because of finances, it's not going to benefit us in the classroom. We need to make sure our teachers are paid better than they are.
Yeah,
And let me respond. You know, my mom was a public school teacher, and I went to public school my entire life. And so I don't need a lecture from anybody about the importance of our teachers or that they should be paid adequately. They should be paid adequately. We've had resistance from some sectors of the educational establishment that Mr. Morley refers to not allow us to pay high-performing teachers directly, because they want to control those monies, and they want to pay administrators and other people that are not engaged in instruction. We need to make sure we are putting as much as possible into the instruction of our students to have a world-class education, and part of that is increasing our teacher salaries. We also have a Best and Brightest program that encourages kids that are coming out of college that have very high scores, very high grades, to enter the teaching profession. We give them, I think it's a $6,000 bonus, just to come and try teaching, and hopefully they develop that passion and will stay in the teaching profession. So I care very much about education. This is the path to opportunity. It is about money, but it's not all about money. And we can get there. We can do that without dramatically raising taxes. I'm committed to doing that. I've done it every year I've been there, and I do have a record on that score.
We don't have to raise the taxes to do that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We don't have to raise the taxes to do that.
Where's the money going to come from? Let's talk about that, because we live in a balanced budget world, and I can tell you there's very limited resources, and you have to decide, you want to spend more in this pot, and if you don't, then if you do, then you got to spend less in this pot, or you raise taxes. And I appreciate Mr. Gillum's honesty. He wants to dramatically increase taxes. What he's proposing will have to have far more taxes than what we're talking about. And constitutional amendments change. We will go the way of California. And so we have a constitutional amendments on the ballot this year, such as Amendment 2, that if not passed, it's currently in the Constitution. It sunsets, will be a $700 million increase in taxes. It will affect renters, and it will affect our small businesses. And so taxes come and taxes go. And if we elect the wrong people, we'll have more taxes. We can't fund everything that they're promising.
You keep bringing up a race that's not ours. We are talking about the state legislature, not the governorship. The House is where budgets are passed. The governor is not, he has his proposals that he makes, but then it's up to the state legislature to appropriate funds. And right now, have you not been boasting to like the Times Union that we have not only a balanced budget, but we have a surplus? We have the money there. And then we also have a lot of other ways to generate income that does not require raising the existing taxes.
Well, we have the income we have, and so our surplus, our projected surplus, is about $200 million out of a $89 billion budget. That's not much of a surplus, and so we do take some of that because we've had continual job growth by keeping taxes low, keeping regulation low, allowing businesses to generate the wealth. They pay taxes, and we're able to spend more money on education. But you can't make a giant leap, and Mr. Gillum is at least being honest about the fact that it requires a dramatic increase in taxes. He also wants what he calls Medicare for all, which is socialized medicine. It's government-run healthcare. It's fair to ask if Mr. Morley is elected from this conservative district, will he support the high spending and high tax agenda of Andrew Gillum?
Nice deviation and spin.
I mean, answer the question.
I will. Now, the reason we have a surplus is because we are mismanaging the money that we currently have. The priorities are mixed up. We have Amendment 1 funding that was misappropriated. We have the Amendment 2, the medical marijuana, that was just all hacked to pieces. You have so many amendments that were, and trusts like the Sadowski Fund, where we had money that was supposed to go there, but it was swept out and put elsewhere so that we could balance the budget and have that surplus. The plan that my opponent is talking about, it worked for a short period of time, and that's why we have the gains that we have. But now we are seeing the unintended consequences of running the state the way that we have been. And we're seeing it in the degradation of our water quality. We're seeing it in the loss of our green spaces. We're seeing it in the pressure on our state's water resources, and it's not sustainable. Make sure that we are reprioritizing so that the state's most valuable resources, what attracts people here, is taken care of so that people are going to want to continue to come here. We are the fishing capital of the world. I own a small bait and tackle shop. I know what value water brings to the entire state. $14 billion a year in recreational and commercial fishing depends, we're the fishing capital of the world. It depends on clean water. And if people are not coming here to fish and to stay in the hotels and to eat at the restaurants and shop in the stores, we're losing. So while, yes, we see these little gains trickling down after 20 years of single party control, it's also been 20 years of forgetting what our priorities in Florida should be. And I want to bring the priorities that we need focused on back into the light. So that's what I'm going to do in Tallahassee, is focus on the issues that matter to the people of Florida, not the partisan politics that my opponent keeps bringing up via the governor's race and other races not pertaining to this particular race.
And this is an area where we agree. I mean, I agree on the water issue, and I mentioned already what we've done to try to make sure we're protecting the water bodies around this area. It's critically important. The other thing we have to do is look at septic tanks. When people are living on the water and we're seeing nutrients go into the water bodies, it's a contributor to some of the things we've seen south of our district down in South Florida. And the other thing is we need to continue on the path we are with the Everglades SERP. It's been successful to a degree, but it's not going fast enough. It's a multi-year plan, but nutrient levels have come down in many areas, but they're not. It's not where it needs to be. And so we've got to look at where the water's coming from in Central Florida and make sure that we're not sending dirty water down in the Everglades, because right now we are.
Well, we have made strides since the government started funding for Senate. I will say that we're getting a lot.
No. I mean, this goes back to Jeb Bush. This is, this is a state and federal program that is a multi-billion-dollar program. It's a complicated thing. Remember, when people start colonizing, we came into Florida, we took the Kissimmee River, for example, and it meanders and winds. And one of the things that accomplishes is it cleans up the water. It takes the pollutants out. So what did we do? And this is going back to the Army Corps of Engineers before Adam and I, including me, were born. Any of us were born. And we took the Kissimmee River and we did these straight line canals. And so water, dirty water, is rushing into the Everglades. So guess what we're doing now with the SERP? We're going back and restoring actually the old Kissimmee River bed and following that line so nature can do what it does well. But we continue to support additional funding. That EFI bill that I mentioned, we put extra money into the Herbert Hoover dike to shore that up. The dike around Okeechobee is dangerously compromised right now, and it's something the federal government, frankly, has ownership of and should do more. I would support, if they'll give us the money, us getting that money and finishing the job. But it needs to be done.
I think Trump just signed a bill for a lot of that.
He did, and that's progress.
All right, I have a question from Facebook. One of our viewers wants to know what you can do to protect single-family neighborhoods from unmanaged short-term vacation rentals. This is not a property right. This is a backdoor business use around local property.
So yeah, and again, it is a balance, because if you own a home, you can certainly rent it out on a long-term basis, and that's not really what we're talking about. But I support control, and I've voted that way to support the local ordinance we have in place, provided that they strike that balance to include HOAs having the right to say we want, or condo associations to say we want short-term vacation rentals a lot, a little, or not at all, and to set that for themselves so that the residents of that community can determine what they want in the way of short-term vacation rentals. There are other areas that want them, and they talking to the people down in Flagler Beach. If you talk to the restaurateurs and the businesses down there, A lot of them love vacation rentals because they bring a lot of money in. We're not going to be a community, nor do we necessarily want to, that's going to have high-rise hotels on the beach. We like it the way it is. But that's a way to fill gaps and allow tourists to come to our area, spend money on our businesses, and that's a good thing. And so it's where it's done, it's how it's done, and the balance. And it really is, when you talk about trying to go down the middle, this is an issue in my mind. Private property rights are important, and the neighborhoods are important, preserving the quality of life in that neighborhood. And you've got to strike the right balance that everybody can live with, and I support that.
I'd actually agree. Going back to that local control and home rule, I do believe that depending on the community that you're in, the local officials should be able to work to strike that balance so that you can have that. But there's noise ordinance, and there's a lot of issues that come up with these short-term rentals, and those are the things that need to be addressed locally, because in some communities within the district, they want them. Other communities don't want them. And so that really is why it's so important to protect home rule, so that we can make that decision as a local community and say, these are the parameters in which we are going to allow this, and I support that.
Sorry, Jim. We have another question here from one of our viewers on Facebook. What's your stance on recreational and medical marijuana? Go ahead.
Me? I'm for full legalization. It is way past time to do away with the outdated, ineffective, and inefficient enforcement of these prohibition laws. If you want to talk about raising teacher pay, if you want to talk about all of the surplus money that we could have, legalize marijuana, tax and regulate it like we do alcohol and tobacco, and watch that industry boom. We already have the likes of Coca-Cola and Corona and all of these other companies that are investing in this. It's coming. That's all there is to it. It is on its way. Now, do we want to be ahead of the curve on it and make sure that our small businesses and entrepreneurs can get their foot in the door in this budding industry? There we go. Okay. Then we need to make sure that we're going to move towards that, so that our residents here can get on that train, and we have the fern capital of the world in our district. If they could start growing hemp, that would be a great crop that they could start growing. If we were able to get ahead of this rather than waiting and wasting resources enforcing these prohibition laws, and then think of the benefits to the criminal justice system if we were to legalize this. The number of people that are locked up right now for small possession charges, and how much it costs us as taxpayers to take otherwise productive members of society out of the community and then lock them up in the joint. Another pun. Locking them up and paying the tab, that doesn't make sense. We need to move towards full legalization.
Well, I can't match Adam's enthusiasm on this issue, so I'll try to give you where I stand on it. Number one, the voters voted overwhelmingly for medical marijuana, and I supported the legislation that enacted that. So basically, we supported an amendment, and then there's a lot of details in between who can sell it, how it goes to market, but the idea was this is going to be medicine. And so it is like medicine, highly regulated, and I don't think personally, if you want to ask for where I think the state has dropped the ball, I think that the Department of Health has not done a good job in getting this to market. They should do so. We've done our part right after the next session, after the amendment passed. They should move more quickly. That's medical marijuana. I think as a state, we need to look and see how that plays out. And right now there's litigation over whether it should be smoked or not. I don't know about you, but I don't smoke my medicine. I take it in a tablet or in whatever it is, but it's not, I don't smoke it. And so there's litigation that's going through the courts now about what we did or didn't vote for. I'm not convinced that 70% of the people voted to smoke marijuana, but what we want to do is we want to make sure the purity and whatever is beneficial to people with seizures and other serious conditions is provided to them. And I've supported that. I've also supported right to try legislation. I believe outside the medical marijuana case is that if people have severe medical needs, they should be able to try drugs that have not yet gone through all of the processes, understanding the risk, but they ought in the last time of their life, if the doctor has said that they're terminal, have a right to try experimental drugs to save their life. That would certainly include other forms of medical marijuana. With respect to recreational marijuana, it's a different situation. Look, I understand the recreational part. I get it. It's just like we have alcohol and cigars and cigarettes and whatnot for recreational purposes, but it's not a healthy activity for healthy people. I had a call from a client here recently who had a worker who crushed his fingers. He's going to keep his fingers, but he crushed his fingers. Admitted later that day that he'd smoked marijuana before he came to the job. He's going to get $0 from the insurance company, from the workers' comp carrier. He's not covered. He hurt himself. He could have hurt somebody else. And so I don't think we want people flying our planes or driving our Ubers or our taxi cabs that have, lit up a joint or a butt or whatever, funny pun. I think we needed to see this play out. And I think the experience in Colorado has not been altogether positive. You now have differences in potency in marijuana where what you grew in your backyard, 20 years ago is of a certain level of THCs. And now you're seeing multiple times, 4 or 5 times the level of potency in Colorado. Is that a good thing? I don't think it is. I don't think it is. And I think you, unfortunately, as with anything else, alcohol, you have addictive personalities, and it does not become a positive for them, for their employment, for their families, for their finances. And so let's take it slow. There are areas where I might agree with Adam in that I don't think we should, keep people locked up in prison for years for marijuana possession, for example. I think we can look at legitimate reforms there. I don't think full legalization is where we need to go today.
We need full legalization to bring it into the light so that we are able to regulate it, so that people are not buying the laced stuff that they have on the streets illegally, because that's what's going to happen if we do not get ahead of it. That stuff that's in Colorado, it's here too, along with the opioid addiction crisis that we have. We know that in states that have legalized it, we have seen a decrease in the opiate addictions because people are using it as an exit ramp. They call it a gateway drug. It's an exit ramp off of the addiction to heavy pharmaceuticals and opiates. So
We're getting into medical discussion here.
Yeah, I can't accept that the cure to the opioid crisis is smoking marijuana. So
All right, let's put out that joint. I want to ask you one and real quick answer to this. When you both profess want to see the finest education system in Florida, do charter schools push us in that direction?
me first?
Yeah.
So no, I do not believe that they push us in that direction. We are looking at already there's question under the state constitution as whether what we're doing with charter schools is even legal, because we are under the constitution talking about providing a uniform world-class education for all public school students. While charter schools are public schools, they are still run and managed by for-profit private companies, and you often have leases to landlords. There is too much risk of having conflicts of interest. We already know that there are several legislators who are their spouses own the companies that run and manage charter schools. There's too much chance of corruption there. And the fact that we do not provide enough funding, and then we're creating this competition between public schools for funding and charter schools for funding, essentially racing to the bottom because we do not have enough funding for our public schools. And so now we're trying to siphon funds to charter schools. That is moving towards a privatization of our education system, which I oppose.
Adam's right that charter schools are public schools. And it's also the case that they get the exact same amount of historic funding that the traditional public schools get. And so there are many nonprofit charter schools, and so whatever they get, and they don't get any more than that. And so it's not the case that they're profiting off the taxpayers. They're getting the same amount per student. If my son or daughter is in a traditional public school and travels across the street to a public school that happens to be a charter, they get the same amount of funding per student. And so there's a lot of misinformation out there about that. Now, when you talk about our state education policy, you got to separate out what's good for the state in areas where some public schools are failing, and St. Johns County, Flagler County, Volusia County, the counties I represent, where the schools are really good. And where if you had universal choice, if you just said everybody, here is we're going to send money wherever you want us to send it, most people will go to traditional public schools here in St. Johns County because we have great choices. And so that point needs to be made. But unfortunately, not every student in every city in the state has a great quality education in a traditional public school. And so one of the things that we've done with Schools of Hope is if you are in a persistently failing public school that's below a C for 3 straight years, then high-performing charter schools that have performed at a high level and shown positive outcomes, that they can get better outcomes than that traditional public school, we allow them to come in and bid for that money. Again, the same amount of money per student. If they can do a better job teaching that same student and achieve better educational outcomes, why in the world would we not do that? I mean, that really ought to be the way we redefine public education, is every child, and I'm thinking here of the Step Up program, where 100,000 students, mostly African American, mostly Hispanic minorities, at around $25,000 a year, are given the chance to leave a school that is failing them and have an opportunity to go to the school of their choice. Andrew Gillum and many of the people, unfortunately, in the FEA filed a lawsuit to shut that program down. They failed. But we shouldn't be defending institutions. We should be defending children. And I'm passionate about this issue. The only question is, how can that child get the best quality education? And that might be within a traditional public school, but maybe a dollop of tutoring or a little bit of online learning, or the Khan Academy, if you're familiar with that. We've got to look at people as individuals and not say, wherever you're born and whatever zip code you're in, you're stuck. I don't want people to be stuck. I want everybody to have an opportunity to rise up the economic ladder. We're fortunate here, but not everybody in the state is that fortunate.
Okay. We got to pretty much wrap up. Do you guys have something you need to?
No.
Well, what we'd like to do now is just each of you take a couple minutes just to wrap up. We got some guys downstairs coming in after you, so just tell us, just wrap up what you think and where you're at.
Want me to go first?
Go ahead.
All right, sure. Well, thank you very much for those that have endured the entire hour. I appreciate your engagement and your involvement and listening to both Adam and I in a spirited discussion. And look, we both care about this community and care about the state, have different ways to get there. Mine is more freedom and more opportunity. I would say as a theme, if you're looking for something that unifies what I believe in and what I'm trying to push for, is really more freedom and more opportunity. And that means continuing to your tax money with you where you know the best use for it. It means keeping our balanced budget in place where we're not busting our budget and asking for more and more from the taxpayers, so we have an environment where companies can grow, create jobs, increase wages, as we've seen over the last several years. And then opportunity, where we continue to have high-performing K-12 schools. Where we give other choice options. And I'm committed to continuing to increase our education funding to accomplish that as necessary. With our higher ed, which we didn't talk about today, we were ranked by U.S. News as #1 in higher ed, in part because we are the 49th cheapest place to get a college education. And so we've been able to keep tuition rates low because, again, for me, it's really about somebody with a lot of money can go to the best school and they can pay for it. Somebody that has no money needs a shot. And so, I didn't grow up wealthy, and I think it's really important that we have an educational path for every single student in this state, that they can climb the economic ladder along with the rest of us, and I'm committed to doing that in my time in the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks again for watching, guys. I am Adam Morley. I'm running for State House District 24. If anything that I want you to know and remember is that I'm here. I own a business here. I have a family here. In fact, my son will be going to school here, and nobody has the intent of helping this district more than I do. We both agree that we want to do good for this state, but when we're talking about who's going to be representing you in this district and answering your calls when you call and responding to your emails, I'm going to be the one doing that. It's not going to be a generic email going out on an issue. I want to say that it's been a great, very spirited and lively debate. The lip service and words and rhetoric that we've heard is fantastic, but we really need to do more than listen, and we need to look. We need to look at the records and look at the individuals, put partisan politics aside and focus on what they have actually done, because words only go so far. You can check out my website, votemorley.com, or you can find me on Facebook at Adam Morley for Florida House 24 to see everything that I've been doing.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks so much.